epistles as a collection, and so yes, hopefully soon. All right, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's one of
that's
Paulino's one he's looking really forward to.
Oh,
Shoot,
good.
how long has that been? We've been waiting for a while.
Okay. No
there it
worries,
goes, yeah.
Justin. We're just talking story. No worries. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, sis.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm gonna start over again. Shalom and welcome to another Digital Readers Club. We're excited to have all of our readers here with us in Discord today, and we're going to be continuing to read the Legends of the Jews, Book 2, and we are on the part called King of Ethiopia, which is on page 273 if you have the paperback copy. You can also find it on Sacred Word Publishing. Waiting for some moderators to come in so that they can put up some links for us. And yes, thank you so much, Adrian. Adrian says it's all good now. Okay, we're good. All right. So I'd like to introduce the readers that will be with us today. Brick, Clark, Zen, Penny, and Chelsea. And of course, myself. This is Lisa George. I'm hosting today because Sharon is not able to be with us. She is participating in a church event where they're having a Shabbat dinner. So Shabbat Shalom to everybody who's celebrating Shabbat today as well. Okay, so how are you guys all doing? Does anyone, I asked you this just like 5 minutes ago, but does anybody have anything they'd like to share with the rest of the group?
All good, but I'll share those updates once more that we're going to be releasing the Book of Tefi and the He Walked the Americas. We're going to put those in the book form for everybody to make them more widely available and less expensive. And also I'll be releasing that Seekers of Lost Paradise book very soon. And I'm thinking I'm going to start being able to do guest appearances at some point. So got a number of shows that I'll be going on as guests soon as well.
Awesome, Zen. Your voice sounds so good today. I'm so glad.
It's definitely getting much better, yeah.
Yeah, our prayers are being answered, brother. It's so good to have you back and sounding strong. And
it's so grateful, yeah.
Awesome. It's also good to hear that you're going to be publishing with Sacred Word that He Walked the Americas, because that's a book that we were planning to go through eventually, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that way everyone will have it available by the time by the time we get through the end time apocalypses that we're doing now.
Yes, exactly.
Good to go. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And for those of you who have not read He Walked the Americas, Zen and I talked about doing some upcoming shows to review that entire book. So be prepared when Sacred Word Publishing publishes it. And it's an excellent collection of stories and encounters with the Messiah, the Native Americans. And it's such a mind-blowing read to just find out what, one of my questions I've always had is, what did the Messiah do during ages 12 to 30 that we don't get in the Bible, right? So this answers some of those questions, and it's really awesome read. I'm looking forward to that. We have Brick and Clark. How are you guys doing, brothers? You guys staying warm? Brick was just saying that he got like 5 inches of snow, and Penny was saying that the snow is headed her direction after this, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm here in the sunshine. Sun's going down. So it's a clear night. It'll be cold. No rain today. So yeah, today was a break in the last 4 or 5. Beautiful weather. Stars were out last night. So all in all, I'm not complaining about that. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Nice. Yes. It's beautiful here too. I always feel guilty when everyone's saying they're having ice and snow and all this. But yes, Clark and I are closer together than the rest of us as far as geographically speaking. Brick, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Oh, no, just have pity on us that aren't smart enough to move away from it.
Yeah. And we're still taking our vitamin D and the vitamin C up here.
Oh, good. That's good. Yeah, it's hard.
Because
it's hard.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Chelsea.
I was going to say, I'm in the same boat. I also have to take vitamin D in the middle of winter, whereas Paulino, he's a true Michigander. He goes out on the ice in snow and shorts.
Whoa,
Oh,
y'all are in Michigan?
what?
Whoa,
Boy shorts weather.
Yeah.
Yep.
that's some serious cold there.
Oh my goodness. Gee, that's I can't imagine that. But yes, he's very brave, Chelsea. Okay. Zen, open us with prayer. Well, we were kind of waiting for YouTube to open up, and so we can start reading if you guys are ready. Brick, would you like to start us out? Yeah, let's get moving here.
Yes, ma'am. The king of Ethiopia. They couldn't find none except Moses, fit to be their king. They hastened and stripped off each man his upper garment and cast them all in a heap upon the ground, making a high place, atop of which they set Moses. They blew with trumpets and called out before him, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" And all the people and the nobles swore unto him to give him Adonijah for a wife, the Ethiopian queen, the widow of Canos. And they made Moses king over them on that day. They also issued a proclamation commanding every man to give Moses what he possessed. And upon the high place they spread a sheet, wherein each one cast something, this one a gold nose ring, and that one a coin, and onyx stones, and beldium, pearls, gold, and silver, in great abundance. Moses was 27 years old when he became king over Ethiopia, and he reigned for 40 years. On the seventh day of his reign, all the people assembled and came before him to ask his counsel as to what was to be done to the city they were besieging. The king answered them and said, "If you hearken to my words, the city will be delivered unto our hands," proclaiming with a loud voice throughout the whole camp unto all the people, saying, "Thus saith the king, go to the forest and fetch hither of young of the stork, each man one felding in his hand. If there be any man that transgresseth the word of the king, not bringing a bird, he shall die. And the king shall take all belonging to him. And when you have brought them, they shall be in your keeping. You shall rear them until they grow up, and you shall teach them to fly as the hawk flieth. Pass."
All the people did. And after the young storks had grown,
Clark, I'm so sorry. Can anyone else hear Clark's mic?
No.
Yeah, Clark, I think you're having some technical issues, brother. It looks like he is muting for a little bit. Zen, would you like to pick that up if you don't mind, brother? Thank you.
All the people did according to the word of Moshe. And after the young storks had grown to full size, he ordered them to be starved for 3 days. On the third day the king said unto them, "Let every man put on his armor, and gird his sword upon him. Each one shall mount his horse, and each shall set his stork upon his hand, and we will rise up and fight against the city, opposite to the place of the serpents." When they came to the appointed spot, the king said to them, "Let each man send forth his young stork to descend upon the serpents." Thus they did, and the birds swooped down and devoured all the reptiles and destroyed them after the serpents were removed. In this way, the men fought against the city, subdued it, and killed all its inhabitants. But of the people besieging it, there died not one. When Balaam saw that the city had fallen into the hands of the besiegers, He exercised his magic arts, which enabled him to fly through the air, and he carried with him his 2 sons, Janus and Jambres, and his 8 brothers, and they all took refuge in Egypt. Seeing that they had been saved by the king, and the city had been taken by his good counsel, the people became more than ever attached to him. They set the royal crown upon his head and gave him Adoniah, the widow of Kykanos, to wife. But Moshe feared the stern God of his fathers, and he went not in unto Adoniah, nor did he turn his eyes towards her. For he remembered how Abraham had made his servant Eleazar swear, saying unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife for my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. He also remembered what Isaac did when Jacob fled before his brother Esau, how he commanded his son, saying, Thou shalt not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, nor ally thyself by marriage with any of the children of Ham. For the Lord our God gave Ham, the son of Noah, and all his seed as slaves to the children of Shem and Japheth forever. Pass.
At that time, Aram and the children of the east heard that Kikanos, the king of Ethiopia, had died, and they rose up against the Ethiopians. But Moses went forth with a mighty army to fight against the rebellious nations, and he subdued them, first the children of the east, and then Aram. Moses continued to prosper in his kingdom. He conducted the government in justice, righteousness, and integrity, and his people loved and feared him. In the 40th year of his reign, while he was sitting upon his throne one day, surrounded by all the nobles, Adoniah the queen, who was seated before him, rose up and spake. What is this thing which you, the people of Ethiopia, have done these many days? Surely you know that during the 40 years this man has reigned over you, he has not approached me, nor has he worshipped the gods of Ethiopia. Now therefore, let this man reign over you no more, for he is not of our flesh. Behold, Monarchos, my son, is grown up. Let him reign over you. It is better for you to serve the son of your lord than a stranger, a slave of the king of Egypt. A whole day the people and the nobles contended with one another, whether to pay heed to the words of the queen. The officers of the army remained faithful to Moses, but the people of the cities were in favor of crowning the son of their former lord as king. The following morning they rose up and made Monarchos, the son of Kikanos, king over them. But they were afraid to stretch forth their hand against Moshe, for the Lord was with him. They also remembered the oath they had sworn to Moshe, and therefore they did him no harm. Moreover, they gave many presents to him and dismissed him with great honor. When Moshe left Ethiopia in the 67th year of his age, it was the time appointed by God in the days of old to bring Israel forth from the affliction of the children of Ham. But fearing to return to Egypt on account of Pharaoh, Moshe journeyed to Midian. Pass.
Jethro, in the city of Midian, named thus for a son of Abraham by Keturah, the man Jethro had lived for many years, doing a priest's service before the idols. As time went on, he grew more and more convinced of the vanity of idol worship. His priesthood became repugnant to him, and he resolved to give up his charge. He stood before his townsmen and said, Until now I performed your service before the idols, but I have grown too old for the duties of the office. Choose, therefore, whoever you would choose in my place. Speaking thus, he delivered to the people all the paraphernalia appertaining to the idol worship and bade them transfer them to the one whom in their discretion they should entrust his position. Suspecting Jethro's hidden motives, the people put him under the ban, and none might venture to do him the slightest service. Not even would the shepherds pasture his flocks, and there was nothing for him to do but impose his work upon his 7 daughters. Jethro's transformation from an idolatrous priest into a God-fearing man is conveyed by his 7 names. He was called Jethro because the Torah contains an additional section about him. Jethro, he overflowed with good deeds. Hobab, the beloved son of God. Ruel, the friend of God. Heber, the associate of God. Putiel, he that hath renounced idolatry. And Kenai, he that was zealous for God and acquired the Torah. Pass.
As a consequence of the hostile relation between Jethro and the inhabitants of the city, his daughters were in the habit of making their appearance at the watering troughs before the other shepherds came thither. But the ruse was not successful. The shepherds would drive them away and water their own flocks at the troughs that the Midians had filled. When Moses arrived in Midian, it was at the well that he made halt, and his experience was the same as Isaac's and Jacob's. Like them, he found his helpmeet there. Rebekah had been selected by Eliezer as the wife of Isaac, while she was busy drawing water for him. Jacob had seen Rachel first, while she was watering her sheep. And at this well in Midian, Moshe met his future wife, Zipporah. The rudeness of the shepherds reached its climax the very day of Moses' arrival. First they deprived the maidens of the water they had drawn for themselves and attempted to do violence to them, and then they threw them into the water with intent to kill them. At this moment Moshe appeared, dragged the maidens out of the water, and gave the flocks to drink, first Jethro's and then the flocks of the shepherds, though the latter did not deserve his good offices. True, he did them the service with but little trouble to himself, for he had only to draw a bucketful, and the water flowed so copiously that it sufficed for all the herds, and it did not cease to flow until Moshe withdrew from the well, the same well at which Jacob had met Rachel, his future wife, and the same well that God created at the beginning of the world, the opening of which he made in the twilight of the first Sabbath eve. Jethro's daughters thanked Moshe for the assistance he had afforded them, but Moshe warded off their gratitude, saying, "Your thanks are due to the Egyptian I killed on account of whom I had to flee from Egypt. Had it not been for him, I should not be here now." Moshe marries Zipporah. One of the 7 maidens whom Moshe saw at the well attracted his notice in particular on account of her modest demeanor, and he made her a proposal of marriage. But Zipporah repulsed him, saying, "My father has a tree in his garden with which he tests every man that expresses a desire to marry one of his daughters. And as soon as the suitor touches the tree, he is devoured by it." Moshe: "Whence has he the tree?" Zipporah: "It is the rod that the Holy One, blessed be He, created in the twilight of the first Sabbath eve and gave to Adam. He transmitted it to Enoch. From him it descended to Noah, then to Shem and Abraham and Isaac, and finally to Jacob, who brought it with him to Egypt and gave it to his son Joseph. When Joseph died, the Egyptians pillaged his house, and the rod, which was in their booty, they brought to Pharaoh's palace. At that time my father was one of the most prominent of the king's sacred scribes, and as such he had the opportunity of seeing the rod. He felt a great desire to possess it, and he stole it and took it to his house. On this rod the ineffable name is graven, and also the 10 plagues that God will cause to visit the Egyptians in a future day. For many years it lay in my father's house. One day he was walking in his garden carrying it, and he stuck it in the ground. When he attempted to draw it out again, he found that it had sprouted and was putting forth blossoms. That is, the rod with which he tries any that desire to marry his daughters. He insists that our suitors shall attempt to pull it out of the ground, but as soon as they touch it, it devours them. Having given him this account of her father's rod, Zipporah went home, accompanied by her sisters, and Moshe followed them. Jethro was not a little amazed to see his daughters return so soon from the watering troughs. As a rule, the chicanery they had to suffer from the shepherds detained them until late. No sooner had he heard their report about the wonder-working Egyptian than he exclaimed, "Mayhap he is one of the descendants of Abraham, from whom issued blessings for the whole world." He rebuked his daughters for not having invited the stranger that he had done them so valuable a service to come into their house, and he ordered them to fetch him in the hope that he would take one of his daughters to wife. Pass.
Moshe had been standing without all this time. and had allowed Jethro's daughters to describe him as an Egyptian without protesting and arresting his Hebrew birth. For this, God punished him by causing him to die outside of the promised land. Joseph, who had proclaimed in public that he was a Hebrew, found his last resting place in the land of the Hebrews, and Moshe, who apparently had no objection to being considered an Egyptian, had to live and die outside of the land. Zipporah hastened forth to execute her father's wishes, and no sooner had she ushered him in than Moses requested her hand in marriage. Jethro replied, "If thou canst bring me the rod in my garden, I will give her unto thee." Moshe went out, found the sapphire rod that God had bestowed upon Adam when he was first driven forth from paradise. The rod had reached Jethro after manifold this toodles, and which he had planted in the garden. Most uprooted it and carried it to Jethro, who conceived the idea at once that he was the prophet in Israel, concerning whom all the wise men of Egypt had foretold that he would destroy their land and its inhabitants. As soon as this thought struck him, he seized Moses and threw him into a pit in the expectation that he would meet with death there. Pass.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, continuing. And indeed he would have perished if Zipporah had not devised a stratagem to save his life. She said to her father, "Would it were thy will to hearken unto my counsel? Thou hast no wife, but only 7 daughters. Dost thou desire my 6 sisters to preside over thy household? Then I shall go abroad with the sheep. If not, let my sisters tend the flocks, and I shall take care of the house." Her father said, "Thou hast spoken well. Thy 6 sisters shall go forth with the sheep, and thou shalt abide in the house and take care of it, and all that belongeth to me therein." Now Zipporah could provide Moses with all sorts of dainties as he lay in the pit, and she did it for the space of 7 years. At the expiration of this period, she said to her father, "I recollect that once upon a time thou wast cast into yonder into yonder pit. A man that I had fetched thy rod had fetched thy rod from the garden for thee, and thou didst commit a great trespass thereby. If it seemeth well to thee, uncover the pit, and look into it. If the man is dead, throw his corpse away, lest it fill the house with stench. But should he be alive, then thou oughtest to be convinced that he is the one of those who are wholly pious, else he had died of hunger." The reply of Jethro was, "Thou hast spoken wisely. Dost thou remember his name?" And Zipporah rejoined, "I remember he called himself Moses, the son of Amram." Jethro lost no time. He opened the pit and called out, "Moses, Moses!" Moses replied and said, "Here I am." Jethro drew him up out of the pit, kissed him, and said, "Blessed be God, who guarded thee for 7 years in the pit. I acknowledge that he slayeth and reviveth, that thou art one of the wholly pious, that through thee God will destroy Egypt in time to come, lead his people out of the land, and drowned Pharaoh and his whole army in the sea past.
Thereupon Jethro gave much money to Moshe, and he bestowed his daughter Zipporah upon him as wife, giving her to him under the condition that the children born of the marriage in Jethro's house should be divided into two equal classes, the one to be Israelitish, the other Egyptian. When Zipporah bore him a son, Moshe circumcised him and called him Gershon, as a memorial of the wonder God had done for him. For although he lived in a strange land, the Lord had not refused him aid, even there. Zipporah nursed her first child for 2 years, and in the 3rd year she bore a second son. Remembering his compact with Jethro, Moshe realized that his father-in-law would not permit him to circumcise this one too, and he determined to return to Egypt that he might have the opportunity of bringing up his second son as an Israelite. On the journey thither, Satan appeared to him in the guise of a serpent and swallowed Moshe down to his extremities. Zipporah knew by this token that the thing had happened because her second son had not been circumcised, and she hastened to make good the omission. As soon as she sprinkled the blood of the circumcision on her husband's feet, a heavenly voice was heard to cry to the serpent, commanding him, "Spew him out." And Moshe came forth and stood upon his feet. And thus Zipporah saved Moshe's life twice, first from the pit and then from the serpent. When Moshe arrived in Egypt, he was approached by Dathan and Abiram, the leaders of the Israelites, and they spake, "Comest thou hither to slay us, or dost thou purpose to do the same with us as thou didst with the Egyptian?" This drove Moshe straightway back to Midian, and there he remained 2 years more, until God revealed himself at Horeb, and said to him, "Go and bring forth my children out of the land of Egypt." Pass.
A bloody remedy. The latter years of Israel's bondage in Egypt were the worst. To punish Pharaoh for his cruelty toward the children of Israel, God afflicted him with a plague of leprosy, which covered his whole body, from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. Instead of being chastened by his disease, Pharaoh remained stiff-necked, and he tried to restore his health by murdering Israelitish children. He took counsel with his 3 advisors, Balaam, Jethro, and Job, how he might be healed of the awful malady that had seized upon him. Balaam spoke, saying, "You can regain your health only if you will slaughter Israelitish children and bathe in their blood." Jethro, averse from having a share in such atrocity, left the king and fled to Midian. Job, on the other hand, though he also disapproved of Balaam's counsel, kept silence and in no wise protested against it. Wherefore, God punished him with a year's suffering. But afterward, he loaded him down with all the felicities of his life and granted him many years, so that this pious Gentile might be rewarded in this world for his good deeds and not have the right to urge a claim upon the beatitude of the future life. In pursuance of the sanguinary advice given by Balaam, Pharaoh had his bailiffs snatch Israelitish babes from their mothers' breasts and slaughter them, and in the blood of these innocents he bathed. His disease afflicted him for 10 years, and every day an Israelitish child was killed for him. It was all in vain, indeed. At the end of the time, his leprosy changed into boils, and he suffered more than before. While he was in this agony, the report was brought to him that the children of Israel in Goshen were careless and idle in their forced labor. The news aggravated his suffering, and he said, "Now that I am ill, they turn and scoff at me. Harness my chariot, And I will betake myself to Goshen, and see the derision wherewith the children of Israel deride me. And they took and put him upon a horse, for he was not able to mount it himself. When he and his men had come to the border between Egypt and Goshen, the king's steed passed into a narrow place. The other horses, running rapidly through the pass, pressed upon each other until the king's horse fell while he sat upon it. And when it fell, the chariot turned over on his face, and also the horse lay upon him. The king's flesh was torn from him, for this thing was from the Lord. He had heard the cries of his people and their affliction. The king's servants carried him upon their shoulders, brought him back to Egypt, and placed him on his bed. Pass.
He knew that his end was come to die, and the queen Pharaoh and his nobles gathered about his bed, and they wept a great weeping with him. The princes and his counselors advised the king to make choice of the successor to reign in his stead, whosoever he would choose from among his sons. He had 3 sons and 2 daughters by Queen Alpharanit, besides children from concubines. The name of his firstborn was Jethro, the name of the second Adikam, and of the third Morion. The name of the older daughter was Bithiah, and of the other Akuzit. The firstborn of the sons of the king was an idiot, precipitate and heedless in all his actions. Adikam, the second son, was a cunning and clever man, and versed in all wisdom of Egypt, but ungainly in appearance, flesh, and short of stature. His height was a cubit and a space, and his beard flowed down to his ankles. Pass.
The king resolved that Adikam should reign in his stead after his death. When this second son of his was but 10 years old, he had given him Gedidah, the daughter of Abilet, to wife, and she bore him 4 sons. Afterward, Adikam went and took 3 other wives, and begot 8 sons and 3 daughters. The king's malady increased upon him greatly, and his flesh emitted a stench like a carcass cast into the field in summer time in the heat of the sun. When he saw that his disorder had seized upon him with a strong grip, he commanded his son Adikam to be brought to him, and they made him king over the land in his place. At the end of 3 years, the old king died in shame and disgrace, a loathing to all that saw him, and they buried him in the sepulchre of the kings of Egypt in Zoan. But they did not embalm him, as was usual with kings, for his flesh was putrid, and they could not approach his body on account of the stench, and they buried him in haste. Thus the Lord requited him with evil for the evil he had done in his days to Israel, and he died in terror and shame after having reigned 94 years. Adikam was 20 years old when he succeeded his father, and he reigned 4 years. The people of Egypt called him Pharaoh, as was their custom with all their kings, but his wise men called him Akuz, for Akuz is the word for short in the Egyptian language, and Adikam was exceedingly awkward and undersized. The new Pharaoh surpassed his father Malol and all the former kings in wickedness, and he made heavier the yoke upon the children of Israel. He went to Goshen with his servants and increased their labor, and he said unto them, Complete your work, each day's task, and let not your hands slacken from the work from this day forward, as you did in the day of my father. He placed officers over them from amongst the children of Israel, and over these officers he placed taskmasters from amongst his servants. And he put before them a measure for bricks, according to the number they were to make day by day. And whenever any deficiency was discovered in the measure of their daily bricks, the taskmasters of Pharaoh would go to the women of the children of Israel, and take their infants from them, as many as the number of bricks lacking in the measure. And these babes they put into the building instead of the missing bricks. The taskmasters forced each man of the Israelites to put his own child in the building. The father would place his son in the wall and cover him over with mortar, all the while weeping, his tears running down upon his child. The children of Israel sighed every day on account of their dire suffering, for they had thought that after Pharaoh's death his son would lighten their toil, but the new king was worse than his father. And God saw the burden of the children of Israel and their heavy work, and he determined to deliver them. However, it was not for their own sake that God resolved upon the deliverance of the children of Israel, for they were empty of good deeds. And the Lord foreknew that once they were redeemed, they would rise up against him and even worship the golden calf. Yet he took mercy upon them, for he remembered his covenant with the fathers, and he looked upon their repentance for their sins, and accepted their promise, to fulfill the word of God after their going forth from Egypt, even before they should hear it. After all, the children of Israel were not wholly without merits. In a high degree, they possessed qualities of extraordinary excellence. There were no incestuous relations among them. They were not evil-tongued. They did not change their names. They clung to the Hebrew language, never giving it up, and great fraternal affection prevailed among them. If one happened to finish the tale of his bricks before his neighbors, he was in the habit of helping others. Therefore God spake, they deserve that I should have mercy upon them. For if a man shows mercy unto another, I have mercy upon him. Pass.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for reading. I think this is a good spot to stop here, and we'll move into some discussion about what we just read. First of all, real quick, I forgot to announce this at the beginning that immediately following Digital Readers Club, in about 15 minutes, you can, if you'd like to join us for Hebrew class, you can move over to Hebrew Hawaiian. And we are taking prayer requests right now in the YouTube chat here. And we will start out class as we usually do with a short prayer meeting. So if you do have prayer requests or praise reports to share, please put them in the chat, and we will address them during class in a few minutes here. But anyway, back to our topic here we just read. Does anyone have anything to share that stood out for them during our reading today? I always am blown away at reading the part about Pharaoh having the skin condition and basically performing all these murders of how many hundreds of Israelite children. That just makes me so sick to my stomach. But it's very typical, right, of Canaanites and Egyptian leaders, especially.
Right. One a day,
Wow.
over 95 years or however long, from the time that he was given that advice. But, one of the other things that I cover in this, one of the books that we had talked about previously was the Vestures of Light and the Rod of Wonder. And we see in this story, it talks about how Jethro came into possession of those items that were in the possession of Joseph before, when he was second in command under Pharaoh. And that is a very intriguing story. And for people that are not familiar or don't know what I'm talking about, definitely check out the Vestures of Light and the Rod of Wonder, the study that we did in the Digital Readers Club. We read through the entire series and did a commentary. It's like a 400 plus page book, and has a lot of very interesting quotes as they relate to this particular topic, as well as the well of Miriam and how it was said to be one of those items, like the rod and the garments, that was created even before the foundations of the world, that it would have a very important role to play in the life of many of the patriarchs and matriarchs of the Israelites. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, reading that was really interesting, how the tree would swallow them up, and how, like you said, how it came into Jethro's possession. I also found it interesting too, the part where he said Moshe said that he was an Egyptian and not a Hebrew, and so he wouldn't be able to die in the promised land. And then you also have later on in Numbers where he hits the rock instead of speaking to it, so he doesn't even get to visit the promised land. It was just interesting how those are so similar as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good point.
Yeah, I was having a little Rod of Wonder deja vu there too.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's such an amazing book that we read through. Was it last year or year before last? It was just the way you put all that together. Zen, it just really changes the way you read the Old Testament for me, anyway.
Well, it's certainly not covered in the canonical materials at all. Like, we have very limited references to any of that, and there's a history of it going back from, to Adam when he was removed from paradise, and the word of the Lord had given him the staff, which was a limb from the tree of life, and the garments, of course, were made for him out of the serpent shedding his skin. But what is also intriguing is that it connects the history from Adam to Enoch to Noah, um, and then given to Shem, and the garments, of course, were stolen by Ham, but Esau took them back from Nimrod. And this whole story is conveyed in the Legends of the Jews and also the book of Jasher in great detail, and many other places, as I quote. Um, but certainly, it is a very intriguing story, and also the how it is that Pharaoh was um, stricken with these boils, and his whole royal family had them. And Janus and Jambres, of course, the remedy they submitted was that he should bathe in the blood of Hebrew children, especially the boys. And that was also the reason why Job had to go through similar punishment, in that he didn't uh, oppose the remedy of shedding the blood of these innocent babes. And we see that he also went through a period and a trial with these boils. And that was also one of the reasons why Bethia, the Egyptian princess, was down by the waterside and had come into, acquiring Moshe as her son. She was seeking the healing of the mud from the waterside. And so many aspects, connected to so many different parts of this same story, that if you don't have the details, so you're missing so much of the story, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree, Zen. And we can see that too in this reading where it talks about all the different names of Jethro. Because he saw the rod, he desired the rod. He basically, as Noble would say, five-fingered the rod out of Pharaoh's
Right.
palace. And then he had all these different names. And so I'm guessing it seems like his name originally would be Jethro or Jether, because he overflowed with good deeds. But then it was probably eventually changed to Reuel when he became a priest of the Most High, the friend of God. So I think that's really telling in a lot of ways.
Yes.
May I, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, I think it is interesting. What we see here, at least what I'm seeing here, is that Jethro was in close proximity to the well that was created before the first twilight, as he was in possession of the rod. So he was really in possession of both items, right?
Mhm.
But what we see is he didn't possess the strength or the ability, or they didn't obey him like they did Moses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And isn't it interesting that the circumcision wasn't applied to his son at the top of page 282? And so on the journey hither, Satan appeared to him in the guise of a serpent and swallowed Moses down to his extremities. Zipporah knew by this token the thing had happened because her second son had not been circumcised, and she hastened to make good with the omission. As soon as she sprinkled the blood of the circumcision on her husband's feet. Well, that's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
Where else do we see the blood of circumcision being sprinkled on people? And if she didn't sprinkle the blood, so if there's no blood of the circumcision, it equals death, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So really interesting, because you know, Jesus was a foot washer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he was eventually crucified, the blood dripped off his feet onto the head of Goliath, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that was.
Yeah, that's a good ties there, Clark. I think it's interesting too. This is like, I believe, one of Moshe's first encounters with these huge serpents that can swallow people, because he got swallowed down to his feet, and then later on we read about these serpents that the rod turned into tried to swallow Pharaoh in the palace, I believe. I think we're going to read that as we get closer to the plagues.
Yes, a basilisk.
Yes,
Right.
the basilisk.
There's a lot of magic going on. Balaam used his magic arts, which enabled him to fly through the air. That's
Yeah, that's very
interesting.
intriguing.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
with more than 10 people on it,
Right.
Right.
Yeah, we get that same story in when Peter opposes Simon Magus.
Janus and Jambres.
Yeah, and also in the story of Solomon, it is said that he had that flying carpet, like we see in the Prince of Aladdin or whatever, that story of Aladdin. It's actually based on the tales of Solomon, which is intriguing as well.
Yeah,
Wow.
Clark and I were just talking about that, and you answered the question because we were wondering if that really had any tie-in with Aladdin.
Well, plus we know that Abraham got a carpet ride, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so somebody's out there in the desert selling these used carpets to people.
Well, and not to mention the Library of Alexandria. Do you guys know about that? I think we've talked
Yeah.
about that a little before here, where the Library of Alexandria, where it's written down in ancient accounts that this particular library is shaped kind of like a pyramid, and the books were all on the sides. Yeah, similar to Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas, if you've been there, where everything is kind of on the sides. And then in order to go and read, when you walk in, you basically check out a flying carpet, and you can lay on that and read in there all day. Then just go up to whatever shelf you like. I think that's so cool.
Oh, that's intriguing.
Yeah.
That's cool. I never heard of that.
Yeah, I'll have to
And
put. I'll put a
Frick
link
worked on the
this-
towers at the Luxor, so when you're over there gambling, just think about me when you're riding the elevators.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'll put the link for that in Discord if anybody would like to read about that library.
Interesting stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything? There's so much information that we just read. If anybody else has any highlights they'd like to bring forth before the end of our session here.
I'll just bring up one other thing, and that has to do with the punishment. You reap what you sow, and how Pharaoh had thrown all the bodies of the Hebrew babes, the sons, into the waters of the Reed Sea, of the Nile, and they would go down to the bottom of the Reed Sea, into that kind of area, and that is the exact place that they would later find their demise, meet their own demise when they chased Moshe and the Israelites as they were exodusing out of the land. They, met their death and their doom also in the Reed Sea. So punishment is equal a lot of times to what you do and how you do it.
Yes. So, and we see that in the garden as well, right? With the judgments given
Yes,
in yeah, that's
right.
it. Yeah, it's so prevalent throughout the Bible, where we have a very just and fair God, and he always equals his punishments to the crimes. And so, it's just, he's got wisdom above whatever we can imagine. So just he uses it to teach us and to discipline those he loves. And it's just we can really apply it to our lives today.
Yeah, another account is when they put the babies in the wall cemented the babies in the wall. You think about the Egyptians that were buried in the water, but they also probably were buried in sediment, and the sediment would, I'm sure, harden this rock, and the Egyptians would be also buried within their own type of cement walls.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Well, that's noble for everybody
Noble.
Yeah.
decided to join us. But yeah, so yes, I'd like to close in prayer. If let's see, Clark, if your mic, I think your mic's still working pretty well, brother. Do you mind closing us in prayer today?
Yeah, you guys can hear me, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let's pray. Father, we're grateful once again to just be honored and be able to meet this way and to be able to read such insightful texts. We're just so thankful of our time together and so thankful of life that you give us. You are our life. You are our love. You're the source of all joy and meaning. We're just hanging on to you, and our hope and our love and our hearts are set upon you. Be with us as we leave, and may we please meet again and experience you being among us again. So we thank you for this time in the name of our great and one and only Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Clark.
Amen.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone being with us today and everyone in the YouTube chat. It's been great to fellowship with you all. And if you'd like to continue fellowship, come on over to Hebrew class at Hebrew Hawaiian, and you can continue to submit your prayer requests, and we'll be going over those as soon as we start class. So everyone have a wonderful weekend, and join us for, I believe we have a show on Wednesday with Tim Schwab from the God Culture. So please join us then right here on Zen Garcia channel. And you guys all be blessed. We love you guys all.
Right
Love
on.
you, everybody.
Yeah.
Be
Thank
blessed.
you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Aloha.
Shalom.
Zen, before you leave, what's
Yeah,
your
brother.
email address? Just so I can write it down here and get it.
Zen Garcia 2010 at gmail.com.
2010. Okay. I knew it was a couple of numbers in there. I just wasn't sure what it was. I will get you my address ASAP here.
Okay, cool, brother.
All
Appreciate
right.
you,
Thank
Brick.
you so much. I appreciate
right.
you too, sir.
Love y'all.
Bye.
Be blessed.
Love
Shalom.
you too.
Bye.
Your publishing manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.